So I'm Ra Hogan here with my two illustrious colleagues here at Punch Out Boxing, Dave Johal and the new boy who's becoming quite the star for us, Carl Bryant. How are you, gentlemen?
Yeah,
Yeah,
very
good.
good. Thank
Very
you,
good.
mate.
Fab,
Keeping well.
thanks for joining us. We're going to have a little review of the only boxing movie at the box office at the moment, Creed 3, which we've now all managed to watch. I went during the day and there was no kids. Always important because you don't want the running commentary from the teenagers and the squeals from the toddlers. So yeah, as two fathers, you probably understand that. Very, very important to be able to watch it in peace. And well, I like to dissect a film, sort of anatomically. So yeah, before we go on to the film, should we just talk about what we're covering this week in terms of the real boxing world? Tomorrow, of course, I'm our London guy, so I'm at York Hall for our friends at TM14 Promotions doing a small hall show there. Dave, where are you going?
So I'm going to be in sunny Telford, the International Centre, covering the Queensbury card, which is Nathan Heaney. So in this highly anticipated rematch, which should be fun. And Carl, where are you at?
I will be. Well, I hope it will be sunny Manchester over the weekend. I'm not sure whether it will be, but covering Lawrence Okolie's return to Sky Sports, which will against David Light, which will be a very interesting evening. And yeah, really looking forward to it. Obviously, Fraser Clark on the card as well. I think he's fighting well, I say an unknown opponent, unbeknownst opponent to him after someone pulled out. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it this weekend. It's the whole channel's just pushing on, and it feels like we've got something on every day at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've been quite busy, and another honourable mention there, which loads of boxing insiders are looking at. Michael Gomez Jr., son of Mancunian legend Michael Gomez. And it's not his debut, but he's kind of treating it like it is his debut. I spoke to him last week, and he was saying that this is his resurgence. People will know his name, and he was saying a lot of people are here because of his dad, not Lawrence Okolie. So some good fights on every single card. Right, you got loads of 50-50s on yours as well, haven't you?
Yeah, it's a pretty much a prospect show. Unfortunately, the Southern area fight was pulled. But we've got some good prospects, and as you know, because of the dearth of journeymen, a lot of these prospects are having to go straight in with other prospects. So yeah, still waiting on the full schedule for York Hall, but yeah, there'll be some good fights, and like I said, some good prospects on there who will probably be making waves in the future. And yeah, you guys have got some great fights on your cards, on the undercards as well. I know Carl up there in Manchester, the new signing, Callum Simpson. Watch out for him. He's going to be a real threat at super middleweight. I think he's been sparring with Artem Beterbiev, no less, and holding his own. So when Beterbiev invites you back to camp,
Yeah,
you know you're holding your own. So he's one to watch. His opponent is the guy that took Felix Cash the distance last time. So I think he'll be looking to make a statement.
interesting. That'll definitely be one to watch out for.
Oh, 100%. And I'm expecting a decent fight night over in Telford. Never been to Telford actually, so this is a first for me as well. Nathan Heaney always brings out a big crowd with him, and hopefully he'll be on the cusp of a world title soon as well, bringing that crowd to what is near enough the Midlands, which would be good. Hopefully he can headline with Shabazz Masood, two boys
And
from
Stoke, yeah,
the Stoke area,
Mhm.
which would be interesting. Another underdog I wanted to talk to you guys about is the reason we're here today, which is Damian Anderson from Creed 3. What did you think of the film? Good segue there, yeah?
Lovely.
Absolutely. Carl,
Who wants to
tell us
go
your
first?
Carl, you go first.
Yeah, right. I thoroughly enjoyed the film. Much kind of a polar opposite experience to what Ra had. I went on a Friday night my lovely significant other afforded me. It was kind of a self-care date, she said, so I could go and watch it. So I took myself on a date, watched it on my own, but I actually had about 13, 15 to 17-year-olds sat on the back row. So it wasn't too bad. There were a couple of points where they were, you know, a little bit louder than the rest of us, but it was, I really enjoyed it. I love the Rocky franchise so much, and this really fit in with that, as well as being able to stand on its own. So yeah, I'm looking forward to having an in-depth conversation about it. I'd implore anyone to go and watch it, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just go next, Raw. I was expecting it to be a good film. I mean, it's Michael B. Jordan's directorial debut, and I didn't know what to expect when I first watched the trailer. I had sort of flashes of, you know, Clubber Lang in my head. I thought, okay, this is going to be one of those stories. I didn't know where this was going, but pleasantly surprised. I mean, and this is going to be a spoiler chat, guys. If you haven't seen it, tune in afterwards. But the way it opened with Dr. Ray's, you know, The Watcher from 2001,
Yeah.
The Chronic, classic hip hop, the Golden Globes. I mean, I'll go into the character of Dame Anderson later, but, you know, I think the Creed films have certainly looked at humanizing what we see as the Rocky villains, because, you know, I think that's one thing that the Rocky movies, apart from Apollo Creed and apart from Nathan the Lion Dixon, they didn't have that human aspect. You didn't think about the character, what happened to them when they lost, and so on and so forth. I mean, who knows if there's another Creed film, are we going to go into Clubber Lang's son or nephew or Clubber Lang himself? But really impressed with this film. There were one or two things which I think, you know, I'm no filmmaker, which I would have liked to, you know, see a bit more of. Something I wish they tweet from a realistic standpoint. And one more thing that I really noticed was Michael B. Jordan's attention to detail when it came to the fight scenes. I mean, I watched the film. I watched manga anyway and anime, and I thought I'd recognise that, and it was from the anime Hajime no Ippo, which is on Netflix at the moment. If you haven't seen it, which is about a young boxer called Ippo Makinuchi and his rise to fame. And some of the shots when he's punching the tree, for example, and some of the fight scenes, it looked like Michael B. Jordan was using that as a catalyst and certainly as an idea for Creed 3. And I think I was right in that as well from what I've read. But really impressed with the film. Ra, what about yourself? What did you think?
Again, very, very pleasantly surprised. As you know, I was the last to watch it. You two had to keep reminding me. I was skeptical. I thought, yeah, well, I mean, how many times can you go over the same ground, essentially? But yeah, I thought, as you said, there was the human aspect. There were certain psychological aspects of the fight game and the personalities which they touched on, which I thought was interesting. We'll go into shortly. And some of the, as you know, like I said, I like to watch these with a view to comparing it to reality. And some aspects of it were not as fantastically unlikely as you might think. You know, in terms of the way Anderson's character got a world title shot straight away,
let's break that one down. I mean, I'm glad you touched upon that. And Carl, I'd love to get your opinion on this as well. So in regards to the story, Dame Anderson, I wouldn't call him a villain because it shows in this film as well that Adonis Creed is a flawed character, and he's carrying on this karmic debt, isn't he, in terms of should I have, and you know, ultimately Dame Anderson is a character who was a great amateur, gets into an altercation from a fight that Adonis Creed starts, and then you find out later why that fight started. Dame Anderson, on a 3-strike system, got his 3rd strike by drawing a gun, didn't he? On should we just say Adonis Creed's victim stroke attacker. That sent him to jail. Adonis Creed, as we know, his character evolves, goes on to win world titles. The fame comes with that merit to Bianca, beautiful baby daughter, gets all the fame, the accolades as what a world champion should. Dame Anderson at this point is in jail. He comes out of jail, and that's where the conflict starts, doesn't it? That's where it starts. And Ra, if you want to just mention about his title shot.
Yeah, there are two aspects of it that I think that there are real life precedents for it. One, the going away to prison for 18 years and then coming back to resume his pro career. Back in the 80s, there was a hot prospect called Tony Ayala Jr. And he racked up something like 24-0 with 20 all KOs. He was really rated as a red hot prospect. He was convicted of rape and was sent into prison. So just looking at his record here on BoxRec, yeah, 1982 is when his career was put on hold. And then he came out and resumed his career in 1999. So, yeah, and he came back and almost picked up where he left off. Knocking people out. I remember reading the article in Ring Magazine saying 15 years and still unbeaten. He didn't go on to challenge for a world title. He certainly did fight a couple of contenders, but at that point, I guess the age and the inactivity did show. But so that aspect of Anderson's character, I think, may well have been based on the story of Tony Ayala Jr., a kid that looked destined for greatness and messed it up through his actions, and then still tried to resume in athletic terms probably a lifetime later. But the idea of getting a world title shot in your first pro fight, of course, sounds nonsensical, but it has happened. Historically, it has happened. Way back in the 50s, Floyd Patterson fought Harold Rademacher on his pro debut. The difference is Rademacher was coming as an Olympic gold medalist. I guess back in the 50s, there probably weren't the same stringent sort of rules around who can challenge for the heavyweight title straight away. But based on that, I guess it's not fantastically unlikely. And I would not put it past us seeing it in our lifetime. Someone like the WBC will one day, if there's a hotshot amateur who's already got a huge social media following, I wouldn't be surprised if one day Jose Sulaiman makes a one-off allowance. As you know, they're always making their allowances and what have you. I could see it happening one day if we get an amateur who's talented enough and got enough of a following that they'll allow him to challenge for a world title in his first pro fight. So those were two interesting aspects that there were historical analogies with.
I mean, that's interesting. Carl, just your thoughts on the actual story. I mean, did you think it held up to the first Creed? Was it believable enough for you? The acting, I mean, sum it up.
I think Jonathan Majors was absolutely fantastic in his portrayal. And I think you both mentioned it about humanising. One of the things that really stood, I just think he did that really well. He played the emotions very well. I don't think you'd have to go very far to find somebody or know somebody who is a very good amateur boxer and has ended up in trouble and ended up wasting a career. I think that side of a story is very, very believable and probably happened. I think we probably could name people or know people that would know people that's happened to on a daily basis. So that in itself was very good. And the way that he drew that raw emotion, sitting back and watching Adonis obviously rise to the top, knowing that he should have been that person. I just think he did that really, really well. And that's what completely gripped me for the majority of the film. He was so intense and playing that kind of emotion and then actually winning, we'll get to it obviously, but winning his fight and then turning into this, not monster, but obviously wanting to get it all from Adonis and really grind him down to prove that he is the better out of the two of them from growing up in throughout their childhood or whatever. It was I didn't expect that concept. It's like you said, it was when I was going to watch it, it was kind of a how often can we do this? But it was a completely different storyline to what I expected, and it was the most it could draw the most comparison to real life out of the lot of them. I think I really enjoyed it. It was a great film.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things which, when it comes to the Rocky storyline and why it's so successful, albeit number 5, which we won't talk about that one, but certainly the others, but they have to regenerate a story about how they can make the lead character an underdog every single time. And this I felt was perfect, because physically there was nothing between them in terms of the fight sequences, but I think more he was a psychological underdog, and that's what this film drew upon, about carrying this, you know, do I owe this person more because if I felt this person went to prison, it's carrying that burden. It was brilliantly portrayed, and some of it reminded your montages, which they all do, to be fair. But the storyline, it just reminded me of a good old fashioned sort of, you know, 80s film, like the resurgence of, you know, Top Gun Maverick, for example. You know, just good old fashioned fun. Get on with it. This is the story. You don't need to think too hard. And again, it had shades upon Clubber Lang. You know, when he's training, you know, doing things the old fashioned way, should we just say, as well. But what I think the thing I really liked was the fact that Adonis, at the end of the fight, goes to him in the changing room.
Yeah.
You know, and they had that exchange, which, you know, reflecting now, we don't know what happened to Blank.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it would be interesting to see, you know, what happens to these people, you know, afterwards. But yeah, it was a very. What did you think of the whole, you know, Drago being set up? Drago is in this film, as in the son of Drago. He's back, which is great as well. And also Tony Bellew. What did you think of the Drago being set up storyline?
I think for me, I enjoyed the fact that they were bringing them back, because, like you say, we've watched films before, and these characters just kind of disappear off the face of the earth as if they've been there for one, and then they've had their fight and that's it. So again, it was more realistic, because you know, in a real world, these things will happen. You know, you've got fighters that have fought each other, and they do end up in sparring camps together. It's just, there was the kind of cinematic style of it, and Michael B. Jordan's interest in anime as well has like had a huge influence on it. But there was also that realism in the storyline, so it was just a perfect mix.
Mm-hmm. Tell you one thing, another sort of aspect that I really enjoyed and I thought was intriguing was the psychological side of becoming a fighter. Because you look at Creed when, you know, he's having those flashbacks, and they alluded to it, but I don't think they delved into it too deeply. But the abuse in the correctional facility, there were strong rumors Mike Tyson in his youth suffered a lot of that. So much so that there was at some points speculation that had he had some homosexual abuse in some of these tough New York prisons back in the 80s, which, I mean, you know, American prisons are like, it's almost part of the course. So I think they alluded to that somewhat. But it was interesting also when he had that flashback, the scene where he ran, because there's this idea that fighters, that they're all just naturally super brave, super confrontational. Actually, a lot of them aren't. Some of them have to learn to be brave. Some of them are only brave in the ring, but aren't necessarily fighters outside of the ring. And there's been fighters who've actually even admitted to that. Muhammad Ali, most famously, in his biography, he said, yeah, when the local hard nut on the street wanted to offer me out, no way I'm going to take him on the street, but I'll invite him down to the boxing club. So I thought that was interesting because it's probably not a side of fighter psychology. You know, the fact that they're still human and they have vulnerabilities as well. We don't necessarily perceive them that way because we see the heroics they do in the ring, but I like that they touched on that.
Yeah, it was. And what are your thoughts on the final fight sequence? Because it jumped, I think, from round 1 straight to the 12th, and they had that thing in what's going up in the conscience and the subconscious when you had the padded cells and so on and so forth. Did you like that? Would you like to have seen more of a fight? How we seen the traditional Rocky films?
I think that they were technically much more correct. You know, in the days of Stallone, you saw them just exchanging clean power shots repeatedly for 12 rounds. Yeah. I mean, I think we saw with Anderson a lot more, you know, parrying and slipping. So technically, it was much more realistic and correct. Yeah, that I think it was artistic. Yeah, the way they sort of imagined themselves now fighting in an empty arena. I don't know. I guess we'd have to ask some fighters if they ever feel, you know, like that in a big fight, that they imagine almost that they just get lost in the moment and everything else around sort of disappears.
Yeah, I think Michael B. Jordan must have spoke to, you know, I mean, Canelo Alvarez was in the film for a few seconds, wasn't he? Wasn't he, Carl? You know, Terence Crawford.
Yeah.
David Diamante ring announcing. What were your thoughts, Carl, on Rocky? Sorry, Sylvester Stallone not being in there, the character of Rocky, and also when you went to, not when you went to, but when we saw the gym, is it the Delphi gym? You saw the backdrop of Apollo Creed, and it said, "Create your own legacy." So what were your thoughts on Sylvester Stallone's absence? And if you do want to read about Sylvester Stallone's absence from this film, it's well documented. You can read articles on there about why he wasn't in there, which we won't get into. But what's your thoughts on Rocky not being in there?
Yeah, I think that was possibly one of the things that I was a little bit disappointed with, because I think, you know, it's been such a huge part of obviously this legacy and his own legacy, of course, but obviously the Creed legacy as well. So not having him in there was a little bit of a disappointment, but it didn't entirely distract me from the film. What it actually did for me, and on a positive note, was really put the affirmation in place that Creed can stand alone on its own franchise moving forward, as its own franchise moving forward. Doesn't need Sylvester Stallone, but I do think it would have been good to have him in this one to maybe do some sort of send off, because I can't imagine that he'd be in the next one. You know, if I think we can probably kind of guess what the storyline is going to be about for the next one, which will be very, very interesting. But yeah, it was disappointing, but in the same breath, I think it's gonna work out massively for Michael B. Jordan, in the sense that Creed can definitely stand on its own. It doesn't need Rocky to move forward, which is good.
Yeah, I think another thing for me, well, two things. I always had this question ever since the first Creed film came out, which was, what happened to Apollo's other two children? Right, so they appeared in Rocky 2. I believe they were in. No, I don't think they were in Rocky 4, but they were definitely in Rocky 2 when they were running around the house when Apollo Creed was reading the hate mail that he was getting from fight fans about the fight was a joke and so on and so forth. But it was never mentioned what happened to those children, did it? In terms of, you know, Adonis's half brother and half sister, I think it was. And they kind of addressed that, didn't they, as well, by saying, look, you know, when I was there, I was never treated right in the house and so on and so forth. So, Ra, were you wondering the same thing as well, as a person who loves boxing and also films? Did that ever nag at you in the first Creed film?
I have to be honest, it didn't.
I must
And
be the
it's
only one, but it did
it's
nag me. It did
it's
annoy the hell out
interesting,
of me.
yeah, that now that you bring that up, because yeah, it weren't even clear to me that that Mrs. Creed had adopted this wayward son. So yeah, I didn't actually
You need
pick
to
up
go
on that.
back and revisit the first one.
Yeah, clearly. Like I said, I concentrate mostly on the boxing aspects of the movie, so I didn't pick up on that. But yeah, you're right. They didn't even show them sort of, even just in passing as cheering him on, did they? So that I
Yeah,
wonder if that's an
it's definitely an
oversight.
interesting one. Yeah, I'm glad they readdressed that. Um, and the other thing I was going to ask you is, with Sylvester Stallone and Rocky not being in there was always this thing between Mrs. Creed and Rocky, the towel going in and saving my husband.
Mhm.
And now that, spoilers, Adonis's mother does pass away in this, it's almost as if they, not rob the audience, but they'll never have that exchange now, will they, in terms of, did I do the right thing? I forgot if it was there in Creed 2, if I'm being honest, but I can't remember it. But that will never happen now, will it?
No, I think that definitely would have been the perfect. That's not an oversight because obviously, like you say, you can go and read as to why he's not in it, but there could have been potential for a really good scene. Obviously with her passing, it's something they could have addressed just before that. That's how I would have kind of directed that into it or written that into the film. So robbing the audience of that is definitely the right way to put it. I think it was. It's like I said, it's unfortunate that he wasn't in. There was things that he would have fit into the storyline perfectly with. Yeah, it was. I must be honest, I didn't expect it to pass away. I wasn't expecting it at all.
Yeah, and what's really interesting, I suppose, is it's quite funny as well that Rocky for me has transcended the sport of boxing. Right, it's got loads of fighters into boxing. There's a statue of Rocky Balboa in Philadelphia. Sylvester Stallone, I believe, is in the Boxing Hall of Fame. And when Adonis Creed and Damian and Dame Anderson were talking, I think it was in Adonis's amazing basement that he's got set up, the bar and everything like it. Look, that we should all get one of those. They're almost talking about Apollo Creed and Rocky, and it just seems really surreal that it's built into this. How can I put it? Like, these are fictional characters that exist in this world. It just seems really surreal, and it's making that real, isn't it? I can't explain it. It's a great world what they've created. I mean, what are you looking forward to if there is a Creed 4? I mean, one of the things they looked at, I wouldn't say they looked at, but it's kind of hinted, isn't it, about, wow, Amara can jab, she can move. And that's not going to be there for a few years. I mean, if we're talking 5 years, what would you like to see in Creed 3? 4, sorry.
I think that's kind of the route that I see it going, and I think you again touching on the fact that they've created this universe that's almost intertwining with reality at the moment. I think that's the only way I see it going, because obviously women's boxing is so prevalent and so popular at the moment, and it's growing. It will be that has to be the main storyline for it. It really does. But how they go about that or what happens with that, I honestly don't know. It was. I'd love to see Jonathan Majors back in it. I'd love to see Dame Anderson back in it in some way. Maybe they get together and they're both trainer. I don't know. Something like that would be incredible. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Sorry, Roy, you look like you want the return of Thunderlips. Hulk Hogan coming back.
I think Carl's spot on it. I mean, I guess the next one, if they do one, it probably won't be for 3 or 4 years anyway. So his daughter might be just about the right age, sort of to be sort of entering in top level amateur. I don't know how they want to do it, but I can certainly see that's the way they'll go. And we know Hollywood likes the sort of diversity and woke type, storylines now. So, and with the way women's boxing is just so growing in popularity right now, I think it would tie in perfectly.
Yeah, it'll be a great addition. So just final thoughts, guys. I if you haven't seen it, I urge everyone to watch it. Even if you're not a boxing fan, it's a great film, a fun film. And Michael B. Jordan, let's be honest. Most things he's in, bar the Fantastic Four film, which is probably the best thing in that film, if I'm being honest. Poor film. Everything he touches, I'm not going to say he destroys, but everything he touches is good. Carl, what's your final thoughts, Ross?
Yeah, just again, if you're a Jonathan Majors fan or you've not heard of him, absolutely go and watch this because he's fantastic. Portrays the villainous character very, very well, and the way he portrays his psychological issues in it are fantastic. He gripped me throughout the film, and him and him and Michael B. Jordan's chemistry throughout the film to create the storyline that they had was brilliant. Like you said, you've got cameos from Canelo, Tony Bellew, Timothy Bradley as well, which was great to see him in it.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think you talking about it just being a kind of almost a nod back to the 80s, and with Top Gun Maverick doing so well as well, because I love that. I'm a huge Top Gun fan. I won't have no issue with admitting that. Yeah, it feels like that sort of scenery is coming back, and I'm all for that.
Absolutely.
What about yourself?
You know me, how much I love the 80s. Like Carl, big Top Gun fan, and the Rocky franchise as well. Yeah, this film, like I said, very pleasantly surprised, very entertaining. And there were some moving scenes in there as well. I have to admit, when Creed's mother, or stepmother, she was passing away, obviously in her delirious state, she was mistaking Creed for Apollo. And
yeah, that got me, to be fair.
I felt a lump in my throat. So yeah, I think there'll be something for everyone. Definitely well worth watching.
Absolutely brilliant. Guys, thank you so much for jumping on this. And for everyone else, make sure to follow our coverage from Friday's TM14 show down at the world famous York Hall. Please follow Carl's interviews and footage from the Manchester Arena where Lawrence Okolie makes his return to Sky Sports, and of course Fraser Clark will be on the show as well, and Michael Gomez Jr., who I'm really interested in seeing, and so is I'll say most of Manchester and most of the UK. And follow my interviews from the Queensbury card, from Nathan Haney's rematch over on Punch Out Boxing. But thank you so much, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you, Judge.
See you later.